Well, welcome everyone. Tonight is our November 2nd VISD Bond Planning Task Force meeting. I want to thank everyone who has joined us tonight. This is our fourth consecutive week that we have met as a part of the Bond Planning Task Force. I appreciate the diligent work. It's been a fast-paced month for us on our leadership team as we plan for these meetings each week. I will give you a reminder now and again at the end of the meeting that we will not meet for a fifth consecutive week next week. Next week will be what we'll call a week off, and then we will come back together the following Tuesday, November 17th. But as I just mentioned, you guys have already dedicated many hours to this process, and we certainly appreciate that and look forward to the work that is in front of us tonight and in the future. Just to recap what took place in the meeting, or what is going to take place in tonight's meeting, topics tonight will include a brief recap of the material covered on October 27th. We will have some time built in after that recap for homework share out. So if you were able to join us last week, or if you were able to watch the video, we ask that our task force members go out and talk to 5 community members, people they know, share some information with them and get some feedback and come back and share that with us. So I'm really interested to hear about that feedback tonight. I will provide you with some follow-up information items over the course of the last few weeks. There have been a few questions that have come forward to us, and so we've worked to gather the information that would be responsive to those questions, and so we'll share out that information. We'll be sharing a whole lot of data with you on potential cost estimates of the various priority items that we discussed last week. And after we go through that data, we will build some time in for small group discussion and then large group share out. Related to that bullet item, if you had an opportunity to check your email today, which you must have because you're here, you also had an attachment with several PowerPoint slides that had the data that we're going to be discussing around these priority item potential costs. And so as we go into small groups and we build some time there, I know in our small group environments, we don't have the capacity to be able to put up that data for you, but hopefully if you want to reference it, you'll have the opportunity to open that up within your computer as well and access that data, or at least some of your small group will. The last item on our agenda for today is to look at cost considerations that we will be discussing tonight versus capacity considerations that we have discussed in prior meetings. So for a brief recap of what we're calling meeting 3, our third meeting of this school year. On October 27th, you were provided with a strategic planning findings and directions overview. The strategic planning process again took place throughout the course of several months last year, involved over 80 community members, staff, students meeting in person over the course of 6 full days last winter, but breaking down data that was brought forward from over 2,000 of our community members over the past year. And from all that data, strategic planning findings and directions were determined. We will touch on a few of those that relate specifically to facilities, again, as a refresher tonight. The innovation pathways, we had an excellent presentation from Dr. Shepard and our Director of Innovation, Melissa Carell. And so this was a visual that was shared with the task force last week, discussed some of those pathways that are either already online or will be coming online with new grant opportunities. Everything from the Early Learning Center at FW Gross to the ACE campus at O'Connor, the blended learning pathway that's working its way up through our system, and we'll start at Shields Elementary, Hopkins Elementary, with those students feeding into Patty Welder Middle School, and then the P-TECH opportunities that are going to be happening at West High School. Then on the right-hand side, a STEM pathway focused at Smith Elementary, Stroman Middle School, and then healthcare P-Tech opportunities at Victoria East High School, and a STEM pathway in development. Also, as a recap, we brought forward as a district leadership team some district identified priority items, and we discussed those within a title of high priority and moderate priority. This task force had some excellent discussion around those. We took note of that discussion, and in an effort to be responsive to that discussion, when you see data reported tonight in terms of estimated cost to address high priority and moderate priority items, we've taken the feedback that we received from many of the task force members last week, and in these cost estimates have placed the window replacements, building envelope, and updated safety and security systems from the moderate priorities over to the high priorities. Again, I want to emphasize that this is a planning process. By saying that we're moving those 3 items over to the high priority list right now, that does not mean that they will end up at the high priority list, but our effort throughout this process will be to be responsive to guidance from the task force so that you have the opportunity to look at information and give us refined feedback. So we have made those adjustments, and we'll touch on that again further in the presentation. Now, in terms of the homework that we had for our task force, we asked for our task force members to share with at least 5 people what you learned about those VISD innovative pathways last week and about the district identified high and moderate priorities. And we want to build a little bit of time for you to go into small group and share that out with your small group, and then to have a representative share out those overall themes with this large group. So at this time, I am going to attempt to send you guys to your breakout rooms, and it may take just a moment with a few of you. I'm going to say that we are going to look at building in about 8 minutes for the small group share out, and then we'll come back and share out in large group.
taxes, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah. That doesn't matter. Did you talk to anybody, Natalie? Were you able to talk to anybody?
I did. I forgot what the exact question was we're supposed to answer in our group, Mr. Bonewald. Just what we talked to him
Natalie,
about? Or?
It was just what responses or what feedback did you get when sharing about the district's high and moderate priorities and or about the new pathways?
So I had talked to many people on campus, and obviously they experience those high and mid priorities every day. So it's hard now with COVID. I don't go into the community much. So I go to work and I go home. So
Yeah.
my community contact
Cool.
was limited this past week, other than my husband. So he's used to hearing it, but I did try to communicate to people on campus, which agreed with those mid and high priorities for sure.
So they were receptive.
Present these type of costs to the district, and due to budgeting constraints, it's not. It just doesn't happen. And budgeting is for the instructional side, and the maintenance budget is to. We can say that it can't be well. We think we can get another year or two out of it. Then we have to take that into consideration and make those calls. So,
I know. I fully understand. I feel sorry for y'all.
Thank you.
Y'all are fighting.
And every 15 years we'd have to do something like that. The feedback was, yes, we need to fix schools. This is kind of collective feedback. I shared with mostly VISD teachers and parents with school age kids that were in our schools. I was kind of looking at various teachers who had that. They said, yes, we need it. But the concern was, again, for the costs, if we're looking at $50 to $100 million just to get things back up to speed, what extra are we going to get? So that was a concern, because the last bond, I think, was like $250 million we tried to get or something like that with the stadium and everything else that we want to do, to lose all the things we had. So there was concern about, again, we're $100 million worth of maintenance and repairs that haven't been done over the last 30, 40, 50 years or last 20 years. And that was a big concern. It's kind of like getting us caught up.
Was a problem that they had.
Okay. Shauna, were you able to speak with anybody in the community about the bond?
The feedback I've gotten from people is, they know that there's a need, but they really are,
I got that from everybody.
Yeah.
And I talked to no voters last time, and that was their message. They would vote for fixing schools, vote for building schools, but they did not want to spend money at this time on athletics.
On wants and not needs. That's the general consensus. It's a need and not a want. It's not look, put my name on the new stadium type thing. It's let's fix it, get it equal for everybody. That's the number one general consensus. Let's get it where it needs to be.
It's not prioritized. Are we not reporting things?
Or is our maintenance budget too great to be able to take care of all the things that are that need to be taken care of? So it's
right.
Prioritization.
Like where is it? Where's the hiccup, or 2 or 3? Where's the problem? I'm not sure. And I'm not trying to blame anybody. I just want to help fix it. I would like, teachers, when something in the school is a problem, they immediately report it because they know it's going to get addressed, not because they don't report it because they think it's going to take a year. But.
So Greg, both of us have heard that when we were out talking, there was a big acknowledgement that we need new facilities, but there's also a big concern that the ISD won't maintain those facilities. So how do you overcome that trust if we're going to vote to give,
a lot
Do
of
they, the people who share that belief or feeling, do they indicate what would show to them the district's commitment to maintaining the facilities moving
Yeah.
forward? I mean,
I didn't really get into asking those questions because, you start, you hear, and it's like, well, yeah, we need this. And then it started going downhill. And so I sort of stopped the conversation to elaborate, stop the negativity. So I didn't really, but I mean, I can definitely follow up.
sure. I think,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
please, Mandy, go ahead.
My other little random throw out here is I'm on the Nextdoor app. I don't know, every neighborhood has a Nextdoor app that kind of tells what's going on in the neighborhood. And I was randomly scrolling through after our meeting last week, and there were several people going, oh, they're looking at our appraisal values again. Here comes the bond. They're gonna be asking for money. And I'm like why can't you just have an open mind? We have needs, and these are we open mind to listen to what's going on. And it's like they already are like, I don't want to hear it, So I'm a little scared about that.
I mean, I think part of that is that education of, look, this is the average age of our facilities, and kind of highlighting that our new facilities that are over a decade old are in really good shape. The things that we're talking about are facilities that are past their useful life.
Right.
Guys, we're going to close out here in just a second, and please select somebody to share out with the large group.
I nominate Julie.
Yes.
I will share one quick thing just from my feedback, and it's quick. Overall consensus I got is that I think there's a better chance for things to move along with the bond if we can pitch it or work it to where there is no increase in tax rate. That's just, the people I talked to had experienced stuff. I think Friendswood ISD right now and near Houston is trying to pass a bond, and they're kind of, trying to pitch it as there won't be an increase in tax rate. So that was some good feedback that they say that they'd be on board if that's how it could be worked. So food for thought.
Okay, since I'm in this group and I always feel rude when I shut you down, I'm hitting the closed rooms now, guys.
Thanks.
You said it's in the right-hand corner?
Okay, I think we've got everyone back in the large group. Had a chance to travel into each group very briefly. Want to ask that we start with group one, and if a representative will share out major themes of your conversation, please, with the large group.
Well, I guess I'll jump in. I have a new device tonight, and I didn't realize. I thought there were only 3 people in our group, and apparently I talked too much over my time. So hopefully, Mr. Crump, I get what you were kind of thinking as well in here. The general consensus is that people were warm to the idea, but concerned about why maintenance type issues have not been addressed over the long haul. And also the concern that we'll be in the same point 15 or 20 years from now, where we have to replace a lot of things at one time. But of the people that were shared out, there were other concerns raised as far as overall what schools are getting what, and of course that's what we're getting into tonight. But again, like I said, 3 out of 5 of the people that I talked to were fairly warm to it. The other people were concerned about why we hadn't taken care of what they see as kind of preventative or replacement type cycled issues. Why didn't we have money in the back to replace air conditioners, roofs, and things of that already in our regular budget? I think that captures what I hope Mr. Crump was going to say and what others were saying as well.
Thank you, Mr. Workman.
All right.
Group 2 representative?
That'd be me. The discussions with the population, general population, was concerns until you point out to them that we're trying to keep the tax rate the same. Then relief kind of comes over. They're kind of not worried too much as long as it don't cost them more money. I know a couple of them I talked to, they get frozen taxes. So in their case, it's probably not that major to them. The pathway discussion, it's confusing to people outside than it is for people in the district. You know, you can talk to somebody in the district, they understand the pathway process fairly well. In the district, it's a new concept. I would have thought it would have been, with the discussions in the past, that it would have been more of a known item, but it's not that well known with the people that I talk to. So that's going to be some discussions in the future where maybe some of the costs are associated with that may or may not be a big plus. I don't know at this point from that side.
Thank you,
if I
sir.
missed anything, jump in.
About group 3?
We had the discussion, most people that we talked to did question why we're at this point. You know, what, like group 1 said, preventative maintenance, or what should have been preventative maintenance. And I do know that, and even we discussed it, that the maintenance staff is short-staffed and they're doing a good job of putting out the fires, and they're not able to get in and do the preventive maintenance. But they kind of want to people I talk to personally want to be reassured that if we do get the money, what are y'all going to do to prevent this from happening again in 15, 20 years, that we have to spend this big lump sum on some of preventative maintenance stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Steves. Representative from group 4?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In group 4, we come up with stated that first of all, that out of the whole thing is that people don't have confidence in us. That's one of the first things you have to look at. And that, other than that, the issue is that the people feel like that they're not heard at all also when these kind of things come up. And one person in the group even stated that that people would not even want their children to go to VISD schools. So from everything that I've just learned, and as someone that's also in there to pick it up if I missed it, is that we need to establish a relationship with the people.
Was there any feedback, constructive feedback on what to do to establish that relationship that's not already an effort that's being made?
No, there was nothing discussed on that.
Thank you very much. How about group 5?
I take that's our group. Group 5. Okay.
Go fire away.
I was waiting for somebody to say something, but I guess I got put up, voluntold to do it. So basically, what most of the group said, we talked about, but we also shared about how those that spoke with people and us being parents ourselves, when it comes to, we were talking about passing the bond and talking about the money, we didn't have a problem when we understand that it's better on our kids. And so we went on to just diddle, and I even mentioned that we can talk about STEM and pathways, but that form of an ideology. I kind of use of saying putting the horse before the cart. Because if I know that I'm having a problem with money already, and it sounds good that we want to do this, but when we're looking at our maintenance issues, we think that should be one of the priorities of dealing with safety, even pushing it to the people and keeping it transparent of what's going on to get anything passed. Anybody can jump in if I missed anything in our group that should be mentioned. So I take that as no.
Thank you, Dr. Hunt. Last but not least, Group 6.
Okay, I've been nominated for that. So a lot of it's just the same, echoing the same sentiments as all the other groups, is that there's acknowledgement of that we need new schools, but there's a huge distrust when it comes to taking care of what VISD has been given. And then that using the existing debt capacity, if people don't have their taxes being raised, that any bond might be a little bit more palatable. The only thing that I would say that our group really has to add is, what is the issue with maintenance? We had some folks that had more, or had actually talked to some VISD employees, and that really spoke to, there's, I guess, they just didn't even bother wanting to put in maintenance requests because they didn't feel like they were being met. And so what is the issue with the maintenance? Is we just have too many requests going in, and what's the bottleneck on the resources? Is it staff? Is it just too much maintenance because our facilities are too old, and so we need to look at new facilities, and really trying to drill down and figure out what is the issue with maintenance, if there is an issue.
Very much, Julie. I appreciate all of that feedback. We are taking notes on everything that you are sharing out with us, and there were some questions embedded in there, and so we will be sure to follow up with additional information in our upcoming meetings regarding information that was asked as a part of this process. I want to encourage you, as we move forward, to continue to reach out to others, the people you talk to in preparation for tonight and beyond. And I would even ask you to encourage those people to then talk to others so that we can expand our reach, one, of people understanding the conversation that's happening so that they're not surprised by that conversation. There's a specific reason we're going about this process the way that we are. Everything is as transparent as it can possibly be. There's not a moment of our meetings that's not recorded. There's not a slide that we present to you that's not online the next day. We've invited the newspaper and the television station to have membership on this committee and attend each meeting. So we definitely want the word out, and we want to get feedback from not only our task force, but from our broader community as well. In that spirit, we will be putting out a thought exchange to our community around the work of the Bond Planning Task Force to expand our reach of information and questions so that we can be responsive to those as well. I want to thank each of you for sharing out there, and we are going to move into the next portion of tonight's meeting. And that is around the follow-up information items. So I mentioned earlier that there were some questions that have come forward over the past few meetings. One question was in regard to a request to see tax rate comparisons for Victoria to similar size districts. Another request was to see what the INS capacity would be at a lower INS tax rate than we currently have. 3.5 cents lower than what we currently have. And so we have the data to share out on that. And we also have data to share out a 21 years since the year 2000 VISD tax rate history. And so we'll start with this tax rate comparison of similar sized districts. And so what you're going to see here is there are 12 districts, including Victoria ISD, that are a part of this. These 12 districts were selected because, according to TASB surveys, these are the districts who are closest in enrollment to our school district. They're going to all range in enrollment somewhere around 13,000 to 14,000 students. And on this chart, you're going to see their current 2020-21 tax rate that was adopted for most of these districts in August of this year. The first rate that you will see, which is in orange, is the INS tax rate. And so that is the tax rate that is specific for servicing debt. And you can see Victoria ISD, we've discussed before, our INS tax rate is currently 0.2235 cents. And the low end of the INS tax rate is San Angelo at 0.157. The high end of the INS tax rates for these similar sized districts is 47 cents. When you look at the total tax rates, you can see on the low end, again at San Angelo is $1.12. We are at $1, just shy of $1.19. And then on the high end, you've got $1.52. Just going to set there for just a minute for everyone to have a chance to see that data. The second question we were asked was, what would our bond capacity be if we were to lower our INS tax rate from the current rate that you see there at the bottom of this slide, the current rate being 0.2235, what would the capacity be if we lowered it to 0.1885 or 3.5 cents less than its current rate? And so you can see there's two amounts there. One based on a 20-year amortization. And so our capacity at a 20-year would be 46,335,000. And our capacity at a 25-year would be 47,970,000. And again, anytime that our financial advisors are creating these estimates for capacity, they're making some assumptions. And just so we can talk apples to apples, the last assumptions that were used in creating these figures as well. And then this third slide is a 21-year history of the VISD tax rate. And as you can imagine, over the past 4 weeks, because we have invited our local media to be a part of our conversation, it's created community conversation, and community conversation in person, community conversation over social media. And one thing that we want to do our best to ensure is that people have accurate information. And so a common theme that we have seen is a misunderstanding that the VISD tax rate is higher than it's ever been. I've read that on multiple occasions over the last week. So in an effort at transparency and accuracy, I think it is important to note this graph of the last 21 years and to note that in actuality, the VISD tax rate is at its lowest point in the last 21 years.
Hey, Greg, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
It's Jesus.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I'm at the gym, so if you hear me gassed. Can you go back a slide?
Absolutely.
Do we know why that tax rate dropped so significantly between 2006 and 2008?
Yes, it was in relation to the legislative move to compress the tax rate at that time. So that there was a cap on the tax rate that was put in place by the legislature back in that 2006-07 area.
Okay. At what point in that graph or years was it an intentional decision by the school board to drop the rate? And I don't need an answer now, but
that's a great question.
Where I'm headed with it is we did a very similar exercise with the city where we ran a scenario and said, had we not dropped the rate, where would we be now? And I don't know if it's applicable to the school district, but if it is, I would be curious to know, okay, had we not dropped the rate, had we decided to not drop the rate, where would we be right now with our budget? Where would we be right now with our debt rate? At minimum, simply to show everybody that these decisions make a long-term impact on finances. Oftentimes people think of tax rates as something that it only impacts 1 year. But the reality is that in our business, any decision in any given year impacts you 5 years after, 10 years after, and it might help educate everybody that that decision can have a long-term effect, both positive or negative, on debt capacity and just overall budget.
Yeah, I can really only speak to from 2014 forward in terms of my perception of intent. Where you see that decline, that's a decline in the INS rate there from 2014 to 18, as debt was paid off, refinanced, potentially defeased. You can also see the increase in 2019 that was specific to the 1-year emergency tax associated with Hurricane Harvey. But I appreciate you making that point, sir, because I think it goes to some of the conversation we heard earlier about the ability to afford that maintenance, the ongoing maintenance cost through the maintenance and operations side of a school district's budget.
Right. And we have some very similar issues at the city. And so it has helped us kind of showcase those trends to educate council on just the implications of tax rates in the past, in the present, and in the future. And so if it's applicable, I think it'd be a good exercise.
I certainly appreciate the recommendation. On the priority items, potential cost estimates, a couple of points that I want to make before we move to those slides with the data. One point I'd want to make is that these cost estimates are going to be put by campus based on feedback we received from the task force last week. So they are bulked by campus or facility in terms of those costs. Also, the costs that you see are considered to be all-inclusive costs. So it's not only the cost of labor or doing the actual work that's built in to the cost that you see here. There's also going to be estimates included for the cost associated with various forms of work, including permits, fees, contingencies, which I know were mentioned in a prior meeting. Some of the high priority items that we have on this list are ones where there are unforeseen things that oftentimes come up when you talk about going into 50, 60, 70, and 80-year-old buildings and looking at plumbing. That's just one example of what you are not certain you're going to find. And it's a very good reason why contingency needs to be built into the budget to make sure that you can do the work that you say you're going to do. Just as a reminder from earlier in the conversation, that high priority list has been adjusted based on the task force feedback last week. Again, this is a work in progress. Tonight, we're simply looking at cost estimates to begin a conversation. We are not doing prioritization of specific campuses tonight or prioritization of what within high priority or moderate priority we believe should be done. This is the early stages of that conversation. We will continue to build upon that. When we look at potential cost by campus for elementary, so this is elementary campuses only. Again, I want to remind you that I did send an email today with an attachment with the next several slides, starting with this one, so you would have access to this information. This slide is ordered alphabetically by elementary campus. It is in no way intended to be ordered by any perceived range of importance. It's ordered alphabetically. You can see there is the age of the various buildings that have been constructed as a part of each of these campuses in the second column. The third column includes the costs associated with those high priority items, that list that we just looked at on the previous slide. The next column, that moderate priority column, is going to include those items that were identified as moderate priorities after our last meeting. And then you can see the total cost for each of those campuses to address the high priority items, the moderate priority items in totality. Also want to note that there is a K in parentheses next to a few of these line items, and that K represents kitchen renovation. In our meeting last week, we talked about the undersized kitchens at a number of our campuses, and our child nutrition staff helped to prioritize the need in terms of those campuses that would need to be addressed first. So those kitchen renovations, as you can imagine, those are expensive. That's expensive work. So I wanted to make sure we noted that because, for example, with Allo, the moderate priority list actually exceeds the high priority list, and it's because of the expense of the kitchen renovation associated costs. In most cases, the high priority costs will exceed the moderate priority costs for most campuses. I'm just going to pause here for a minute for you to have an opportunity to look at this list.
Dr. Bonwell.
Yes, sir.
And let me know if I'm just going ahead. Is there a way, like we see these numbers here, the figures on here, would there be an itemized list coming with those figures, or why that figure is that these numbers?
There is an itemized list. Now, we're not going to go into that level of detail tonight per campus to say, for example, at Allo, within the high priority, the electrical is estimated to cost this, the HVAC is estimated to cost that, but we do have that data, and we will put that data together and can certainly share that out. There's that whole question of how much data can you put in front of a group at one time, and so that's that next level of data that we definitely will have available to share.
Thank you.
Great question. I'm moving to the potential costs for our secondary campuses and for our support facilities. Again, you'll have the ages listed there. Under the high priority, the only one that had a kitchen renovation recommended was Stroman Middle School, so that's the only campus where you'll see a K associated. But here again, you've got high priority cost estimates, moderate priority cost estimates, and then total cost estimates for each of those campuses and support facilities.
Bonwell.
Yes, sir.
I apologize. Another question, because I noticed, of course, Cade is not on here. We know Cade is one of the newer built schools, but I remember it was the question about space in the gymnasium. So that wouldn't fall on this for this portion or whatever, or that's just that, because I know that's probably more of a want than a need. But
that's a great question. Thank you for bringing it up. So what you're seeing before you are going to be cost estimates that came forward from the facilities assessment that was conducted last year. And so this is a good time to reiterate for anybody that may watch this video in the future. We included 21 facilities, including those support facilities that you see there at the bottom. The campuses that were not included as a part of the facilities assessment were those campuses that were built with the last bond and opened in either 2009 or 2010, specifically Victoria East and West High School, Kate Middle School, Shalimar Elementary, and Torres Elementary. We do have an opportunity later in our conversation when we're going to ask you to be giving us homework. And one of the questions will be, are there any priorities that the task force has that have not been presented to you that you believe we need to run cost estimates on? And so that's a time for what you just mentioned, Dr. Hahn, or any other item that the task force feels rises to the level of high priority or moderate priority that you would want our team to work to bring that data forward. And this visual here is just a compilation of all of that information, all of those cost estimates for elementary in totality. Elementary's just over 70 million. The secondary campuses, just over 62 million. And for the support facilities, 13.5 million approximately. So total cost at the bottom, a high priority cost estimate to do everything associated with the high priority at all of those facilities. The cost estimate there is 112,749,000. To do all the work associated with the moderate priority is 33.5 million approximately. And then to do all of the work for all of the facilities that were assessed, high priority and moderate priority, cost estimate there is slightly over $146 million.
Greg, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So the previous bond that didn't pass 2017 was a total of what, 141 million?
Oh, Cody, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I'll make sure to bring that back. Unless if somebody else on the call here from our administrative team happens to know that exact number, I don't know it. And I don't want to misquote it.
Yeah, the reason I was asking is just, based on this assessment, has that much changed since then, or in terms of facility needs, or are the assessments that different? Just for future meetings, food for thought is, the amounts seem to be different, at least a little bit off the top of my head, if you guys don't mind just looking at that and, for future meetings.
Certainly. And so I'll share just a little bit of information about that, and I'm sure there's more that would be responsive to what you just asked. What we are talking about right here is looking at 21 facilities, and what we're identifying as really high and moderate priority to address critical infrastructure, just really infrastructure and efficiencies of those buildings. I would not compare that to the scope of the previous bond that was put forth to the community. In that, and again, we haven't determined anything. The task force is going to make recommendations. We're in the early stages of that right now. But in just looking at these totals, what we're talking about right now are really repair items, or efficiency items. The previous bond had a few rebuilds or new campuses, rebuilds of campuses. It also had a portion that was specific to athletic facilities, building or rebuilding of athletic facilities. So none of those items are a portion of what we're talking about here. On the flip side, I do believe that total amount of 146 is somewhere in the ballpark of what that total amount was 4 years ago. And I think that speaks to potentially also the fact that we have to be mindful that every year construction costs increase. I believe at an average of approximately 6% a year. And so what one could have done 4 years ago for a somewhat similar amount of money, one could not do today. Now, this next slide is going to show by campus, and this one is not structured alphabetically. It's sorted based on the far right-hand column. And we put this visual together based on feedback from the task force last week, in that when you look at the cost of conducting the high and moderate priority repairs, how does that compare to the estimated cost to rebuild that campus based on the same square footage as the campus is today, and based on the average square footage price for new construction at that grade level right now? And so I'm just going to use Mission Valley as an example at the top. Mission Valley, the estimated cost to do all of the work associated with high and moderate priorities, and it's got a K next to it, so that includes kitchen renovation, is $4.4 million. For those who aren't familiar with the Mission Valley campus, it is the smallest of our elementaries. Currently about 250 student capacity. And when you look at the size of that campus, if the district were to rebuild a campus of that size based on average square footage price for an elementary campus, it's projected that these high and moderate would be about 56% of that cost of rebuilding new. So certainly Mission Valley, because it's smaller and because of the amount of work needed at a building that was built 83 years ago, it has a high percentage compared to the cost to rebuild new, much higher than any of the other campuses that you'll look at there. Again, would also want to make sure that we keep in mind that when we look at high and moderate priorities, these are the infrastructure priorities. This investment in no way is changing the layout of these buildings. It's not addressing anything other than the infrastructure and the efficiencies.
Greg, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
When you all run this analysis, do you look at the life? I can't think of a better word to use, but the life expectancy of that building. So if you do invest the 4.1 million or 4.4 million into Mission Valley Elementary School, how many years before you have to have a conversation about rebuilding it?
Yeah, that's a great question that I don't have a specific answer to as we sit here right now. I would invite if Dan or Mike from Huckabee would like to add any information respective to what Mr. Garza is asking right now.
Yeah, this is Dan, and we certainly have had that conversation, and there's just so many variables to consider. You renovate the building, but have you really taken care of making sure that it can last another 50 years, or have you only bought 20 more years worth of life? Basically, just the the extension of those systems and their expected lifespan. With new construction, we always target 50-year lifespan or beyond. So that's a great point you bring up. When we're renovating, we are replacing the systems and the critical infrastructure that will get you at least another 20 years. But after 20 years, roofs are aged again. HVAC systems are obsolete or antiquated or just worn out. So yeah, you're not buying another 50 years necessarily like you would be with a new building. And I know Mike was itching to talk about the educational needs of the building and how the things as they currently are configured, contribute to or foster educational needs. And of course, who knows what they'll look like in 10, 20, or 50 years. But Mission Valley specifically has very little square footage that's permanent building and a lot of square footage or equal square footage for the permanent buildings that are portable.
Well,
so
right.
yeah, that's a unique one specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that needs to be a factor. I mean, one of the things that worries me, and I brought this up to Greg before, is because of the elements that would be addressed by this bond, are we certain that those elements are going to last the debt service schedule period, right? If the debt service schedule period is 25 years, but yet you're going to have to replace that HVAC system again in 15 years, then you're still going to be paying for that HVAC system that we put in, next year, and then trying to figure out how to replace it again. And so I'm sure y'all have looked at that, but that's the one thing that concerns me. It's sort of from the outside looking in and just seeing the raw data as it's being presented, is that concern that is that improvement actually going to outlast the amortization period associated with the debt?
So
I don't know
again,
the answer to that question.
Yeah, as an architect, we did talk about that with Dr. Wumwald, in our smaller group, but obviously, we don't want to introduce bias or our opinion of that, and make it sound like, well, of course the architect is going to recommend new because, it's generally more expensive. It's very interesting to me, or I'm very pleased to see that you guys are able to, see the same thing that we see without having to be, again, biased in the conversation. I'll let Dr. Wumwald speak to that more specifically, but yes, that is definitely a topic that we do consider in our discussions when we are making the recommendations. But for the sake of this, the purpose of this information, it was simply just to replace critical infrastructure, repair critical infrastructure, to bring the building back up to 100% usability on its current condition. So I'll leave it at that.
And just to add some additional comments, thank you, Dan. We are mindful that as we move forward with this process, and as the task force moves forward with identifying projects that the task force would like to recommend to the board, that we will be working with our financial advisors to ensure that we are setting up a debt repayment schedule that has in mind the lifespan of whatever is a part of that project. And we would certainly look at that differently if the task force recommendation was for new construction versus some of the repairs that we're talking about here.
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
As I was looking at this, I see we have look like about 13 elementary schools. Is that correct?
Yeah, 14.
We
We have
14
14.
elementaries.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have we ever thought about taking a serious look at the number of schools that we have, and having less elementary schools, maybe bigger but less elementary schools, and see if that would save us money in order to do things instead of keeping all of these schools going? Or is it the particular reason that we have these schools is because they're area located?
You bring up a great conversation that is appropriate for our task force, and that is in that it is a complex question. There's not necessarily one right answer to what you're asking. And certainly as we talk and look at plans for the district, there are various ways that we could go in the future for our mid and long range planning. Currently, we operate 14 elementaries, but just not many years ago at all, we operated 17. And we merged some campuses due to enrollment, due to wanting to work as efficiently as possible as a school district. And so we have elementaries that, from an enrollment standpoint, the size that they're built are smaller than elementaries that are commonly built today. You're going to see elementaries that are commonly built closer to the 800 range, where ours have been built with a capacity around 550 to 600. And so that is a question for our school district and community to consider, should we at some point in time be recommending new construction.
Thank you.
I want to bounce off of him real quick because I just got out of my Southside Coalition meeting, and something that somebody said was, if we recognize that Patty Welder and Stroman were right next to each other, literally down the street, But I just wanted to mention that because that was something that was mentioned during the meeting, and it kind of tied into what he also said.
Mr. Urbano, we certainly noticed that last year. Not that we just noticed it last year, but it definitely sticks out when we were having to look at our demographic study and where our students live and look at our zoning to try to efficiently assign students where we're utilizing each of our campuses effectively. And at the same time, and I'll go ahead and move to that next slide, because you'll see Stroman was built over 50 years ago, half a century ago or more. Patty Welder, well over that amount of time. So these buildings have been in place for quite a long time. I'm sure the city looked differently at the time when they were built. And they probably didn't feel quite as close together perhaps at that point in time. Of course, one was a middle school and one was a high school perhaps. I know they've changed uses over the years. I can't speak to the long history of where they were right now. I don't have that personal background, but absolutely we do notice the location and the proximity of those two campuses. And it does have some impacts when you look at transportation and determining student enrollment and where students are assigned. And this was a good transition to this next slide, and it's going to share very similar information respective to our secondary campuses and our support facilities. And I'll point to Stroman as that top line item to address the high and moderate priorities that were a part of the Stroman assessment, and that includes a kitchen renovation. You're looking at a cost of about $26 million. And to refer back to Mr. Chandler's question earlier, Stroman was one of the campuses that was set for a large majority of the campus to be rebuilt as a part of the prior bond planning. That amount of $26 million, when you look at the estimated cost to rebuild new construction at the existing square footage of Stroman, it's about 41% of what a new Stroman would cost if it were rebuilt at the same square footage. So it's the highest among those campus groups for the middle school or the secondary schools that were assessed. And then you can see down the line the associated costs for the other facilities. Transportation on the far right-hand side kind of sticks out at 84%, and that just goes to show you, well, one, the overall cost of that facility, and a lot of that cost is also associated with paving needs that are at that facility, not necessarily all with the building itself.
Hey, Greg.
Yes.
Question on Stroman. You said that the 41% is predicated off its current square foot size. Now, don't we only use like 70% of Stroman or even less than that currently? Do we actually, I'm just thinking for a comparison between a new school and actual cost to rebuild the existing Stroman. But I know we have levels that we don't use and wings we don't use and classrooms we don't use at Stroman. What's the actual square footage we need for that middle school? I guess that's the question I'm asking. Because that might be a little bit different conversation. It might be, if we go with current capacity, we might be at 56 or 58% current capacity for the rooms we're using at Stroman, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does, Adam. It's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. So Stroman's main building is a 4-story building, and the 4th story of that building has not been used in a number of years. I'm not certain when the last time it was used. Johnny Urbano, please feel free to add any additional information regarding portions of Stroman that are not currently used.
Yes, sir. The science lab's second floor being used that are just old and been put floor, for instance, are our chilled water system, air handlers and stuff are just gone, unusable.
And I do want to make sure that we make the point that that Stroman at one point in time was a high school, and its capacity is larger than the enrollment that we have today, as it serves as a middle school campus. And so that square footage, you're right, Adam, if we got in and actually programmed the cost of a campus specific to serving a certain number that was a lower enrollment than how Stroman is currently constructed in terms of square footage, that may adjust that number to some degree. And that may be some of the homework that you guys give us for tonight. Okay, we're going to come back to a conversation around that data in a minute, but I wanted to address our strategic planning findings and directions as a refresher for what we discussed in our last meeting. We noted that there were portions of our strategic plan that impacted facilities, or that facility has an impact on. And so specifically, I pulled out a couple here that I think are appropriate for us to be mindful of. One of the findings that came out of strategic planning was, we believe having well-maintained facilities creates pride in our district and honors our commitment to our community. And the directions were, therefore, we will ensure staff have the resources to efficiently maintain district facilities. And so I've heard some conversation throughout the night about why this wasn't done or why that was done in terms of maintaining facilities. And I think as we come back and share out information in the future, there have certainly been challenges with resources and resource availability to maintain district facilities, and to some degree that resource challenging going well beyond the ISD and across the state. Secondly, and I would add to this direction that the type of conversation we're having right now in terms of these high priority and moderate priority items being critical infrastructure items, certainly if those types of things would be addressed from recommendations coming out of a bond planning task force, you would be recommending resources that would help the staff to maintain facilities. Another charge of this task force is around mid and long range planning. And so I did want to include that bullet as well, because we may be talking about conversations for addressing some short-term needs, but there are also mid and long range conversations for us to have as a part of this task force. In contrast, when we look at the next findings and directions, we believe facilities play an integral role to inspire teaching and empower learning. Therefore, we will, the first bullet there for directions is modernize facilities to include flexible learning environments, meeting the diverse learning styles of our students. So I think it's important for us to note that the type of work that we're talking about here is all very important work, and it addresses what we just discussed in those findings and directions at the top. That work that we're talking about right now will not address the modernization of facilities in terms of learning environments, and to some degree will not address designing learning spaces, enabling the seamless integration of technology. And so those may not be recommendations that come forward from this task force at this time to address those items. And if not, they may be important items for us to discuss as a task force when we consider mid and long range planning for our facilities. Now, we're going to do something a little bit different. I mentioned for our small group discussion at the start of our meeting, if you weren't here, Ashley is going to be placing in the chat function a link, and I'm going to ask that once you go ahead and select that link, and that's going to pull up what's called a Google document or a Google form, and it's going to have space for each of our task force members to answer 3 questions, provide feedback on 3 questions, both as a small group and then to reference in the sharing out with the large group. When you get that form open, perhaps I can open it here. Let's see what happens. Okay, awesome. Here we go. On this form, you can see at the top, Bond Planning Task Force Meeting 4. There are 3 questions. So small group number 1, you will respond at the top of this form to these 3 questions. What additional information do you need to help in prioritizing potential projects? Question number 2, based on this information, are there campuses you believe should be considered for major renovation or replacement instead of prioritized repair? And then question number 3, are there any additional items you think the task force should consider for prioritization? And I'll just go back to the example of the question Dr. Hunt asked about gym space at Cade Middle School. If there's an area of something you think rises to the level of high or moderate priority that you think this task force needs to consider, we're going to ask that you share whatever those additional priority items are that you would like to see the task force discuss. And so those 3 questions are repeated down this form. If you're in group 1, you'll be answering there at the top. If you just slide down the document, you'll be able to answer for small group number 2, and so on and so forth down the document. And so I will be sending you to your small groups, the breakout rooms, to address each of these 3 questions. And we're going to give you some time here. We're going to give you about 15 minutes to go through these, type in your thoughts. Each person can add thoughts to the list, and then we'll come back out and share out with the large group.
Would you send that back out again, please?
The form? Absolutely.
Yes. Well,
Ashley, will you put it in the chat again, Ashley?
Thank you.
We haven't got to our questions yet. We're still trying to get the links open.
Are you able to open the link?
I can't get it to Cody.
I had it open until I went back to the chat room, the small group room, and now I can't find it again.
If you go to the bottom, can you hit chat again and then select it over on the side? Do y'all have a chat option?
Yes,
That's what works for me.
it worked for me.
Well, and it's okay if everyone doesn't have access to read, y'all can talk through it and add in feedback.
That'll work.
Okay, so the first question is, what additional information do you need to help in prioritizing potential projects? Greg, do you remember what the average elementary school rebuild cost was?
I do. I have it written down. A new elementary was estimated at 23.5 million.
I want to make a point on that because it goes to Pastor Green's question earlier. So that cost is to assume a 550 enrollment elementary. When we had the estimates that first night, we were given that one, which was specific to what would be our average. And then we were given costs for an 800 or even a 900 student elementary. And so depending on if we were to recommend that, if the task force was to recommend a rebuild, I think there's some conversation around what size. And it may be, if it's exactly the same, then yes, then the amount that Mandy shared is the cost estimate based on square footage.
And is it true that, I look back at my notes, if we do not touch the tax rate and it's a 29-year deal, we're looking at about 99 million, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, I have it. Okay, 99.5 million. I just needed to have that number. Okay, so what's our question?
What additional information do we need and to help in prioritizing potential projects?
So I'm just going to throw this totally out there, and it's kind of off the wall. So if we're all in on the Dr. Shepard's vision for this, what was it called? The pathway situation. If we were all in on that, then in my mind, where we need to invest the money are in those schools, the middle schools and those elementary schools. And considering, high schools are new, middle schools need help, elementary schools need help, but if we're on that, gonna try to push that vision, I'm just throwing out there that maybe that's where the money needs to be focused on, is the middle school. And then a few of the I think it was Shields, Hopkins, and Smith were feeder schools into those schools. And then again, I'm throwing out the playgrounds. And so then the elementary schools that aren't getting renovated because they're not in this pathway plan, they still get a playground. Your parents and teachers and neighborhoods happy because they have something new coming. But the downside of me throwing all this out is, guess what? All those elementary schools still have problems and high priority and middle priority that aren't getting addressed. So I'm just trying to throw out a different idea.
So we've been taking a different approach with our streets of sort of, I don't know that you could really apply it here, but it's kind of an optimization and fix our best schools.
People don't want the taxes to be raised. I'm just kind of scared that it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Are there additional things that need to be for prioritization? I would say with all the issues that we have, we need to let the taxpayers priority. We don't need to, if we try to send $100 million or $140 million as a package, the whole dang thing's going to fail.
We're going to lose everything.
Taxpayers prioritize how much they want to spend, if anything at all.
Yeah. But I really hope that they're considering and thinking about the idea of a good education goes a lot further than the dollar does. And I hope that they start thinking like that instead of looking at the dollar.
I agree exactly, but we also the problem comes back to earlier discussions we've had. Our teachers are way underpaid. We're unable to, I'm sorry, let me turn this baby off. I'm sorry. And we're not able to recruit the best teachers, and therefore our students aren't getting the best education. So we've got a twofold. We've got a facility need, but we also have a personnel. We don't have the sufficient personnel to provide a superior education to our students because we can't recruit the best.
And we're going to have to stop and start dealing with that sooner or later.
We have to decide what are we going to do to bring in better, recruit better teachers. And the students on the south side have to have the chance to get the "and" as they call it.
Okay.
To have the "and," it's going to cost money.
Yes, it will.
Occupied nowadays. So there is some type of growth down there with the new homes that they're building south of North Street at Delmar. We don't know that projected growth or how many homes will be built. You know, it's helping the economy for sure, but that may attract more people to that development if they were to see a brand new middle school in that south side of town.
So what do I type in there? I know we're talking about the replacement of Stroman, but I know Celeste, you had said something that was really good. But forgive me, I need you to.
She said that
it's getting a little late.
It is. Why would we throw more money into a school that's so old that needs new infrastructure, and within 2 to 3, 5 years we would have to redo something else to it because it's so old? That makes a lot of sense. And
Uh-oh, Dr. Bonewall's watching.
Are you guys just staring at each other in here? It's like the group of kids you walk around and got to get them back going, huh?
We actually had a big fight. No one's wanting to talk to one another.
So I have right now, Stroman is the number one campus. I'm glad I'm rereading this. In need of, I wrote it like a slave. In need of replacement. Of replacement. Y'all ignore me and my comments. In need of replacement. I put the other schools should be taken into consideration regarding the renovation life expectancy versus new build. That was I think a very powerful thing that Jesus brought up. You know, dealing with that expectancy. But do we have, if we were to list schools, that needs to be real. We know we have Stroman. Patty Wilder, because it's enclosed. I know it's old, you know, that is enclosed, and we know we have that ward. I call it a ward. It's not a ward. We have that section that is probably not in use. But how would y'all rate that? Like, you know, why would y'all?
I don't know, because it's hard not, you know, walking through the schools and seeing them and stuff, because like I've never been in Patty Wilder, so.
Okay. Yeah, so like we did a tour last year where we went through a lot of the campuses and did. And so,
because really the only campus I really know is Allo. And a lot of the other campuses, like I hear things. I have a sister who works at Shields, and apparently a lot of stuff is wrong over there.
So Shields is one of the older ones. My wife actually used to be a teacher there at Shields, and I know they did some renovation back in the day where they threw the walls, because it used to be an open campus. It used to be an open campus, and so I knew they put up. But to a contractor's eye, they'll probably say they didn't probably do, like, if the wind blow, it was a wall that was put there. But
I smells because of stuff that's in the roof and the roof leaks and
It smells like grandmama house.
Can I make a suggestion to your group? You mentioned, Ms. Rideout, about seeing the facilities that we're talking about. And so as we ask the question about what additional information might you need, if there's something around that in terms of those who would want to go into specific facilities, or for us to do a video tour of specific facilities, give us some homework around that if you'd like to see that, please.
So I'll put revisiting
sounds good.
campuses.
Yeah, I guess I feel like I have an unfair advantage.
And the locker room, restrooms, and the concessions area, we could have a I think he said to me when we were doing our walkthroughs last year that we could have a serviceable stadium for the next 25 to 30 years and not have to do a major renovation. So I didn't know if that might be something, looking to see what type of cost that would be if we're doing 150 million and maybe another 8 or 9 million gets us an updated stadium to what everybody says we need, without doing a full replacement. I just, again, I hate to confuse the academics with the athletics, but they do have an important role to play for our students. And then my other question is, I guess we separated out buses at some point, because I thought we needed to replace a major section of our bus fleet because of the age. So I don't think we have $3 or $4 million for new buses on there. That might be something we need to put in this bond, because we're have an aging bus fleet. But those are my only thoughts.
Just to that point, we are going through an alternative method to work on replacing our bus fleet. We're not asking that be one of the priorities to be addressed through the bond.
Okay, I just, again, get him to a safe place and get him to use was the main thing. That works for me.
We are making progress there, and we're actively working on that.
Fayan, are you still with us, Fayan? I know we're texting in the chat, but were you able to get on to where you could talk to us? Well, let's see. I guess I'll read what Fayan's writing in the text. Let's see. If we're replacing, they aren't using all of Patty Welder either, I guess, is another concern. And it said, and of course she said Windows and HVAC systems should all be a high priority. And I believe those all are already into the high priority items at this point.
Right. I think they moved those over based off the discussions we had from last week, that the building envelope and Windows and security, all three got moved over into the high priority.
That's correct.
That's right.
So I guess that's good for Fayan. I guess she lost her being able to actually speak, but her chat's working well. So that's what I was reading for her.
Thank you, Adam.
Did y'all get my 2-minute warning share out?
I did not see that.
Yes, I just saw it pop up. It just came up.
I'm being technically challenged tonight.
But you're doing a good job.
Yeah, I know that when the last bond was going on, it was before Be Well Victoria was in town. It was before we had the Southside Community Coalition. It was before I took it upon myself to fight tooth and nail for whatever the Southside that's of Victoria, not just down under the hill. And I'm telling you, I see great things happening down here, investments from different people, and investments into the South Side from the city, the school district. I don't see growth only happening north, because there's too many people that ain't gonna let that happen anymore, where they're just pushing it that way. You see what I'm saying? I'm too loud, and the people that also support this side of the community are too loud to not just say, hey, what about us? You know, we don't want a Band-Aid no more. We want an investment. So if it's not in a new school, then show us something. And if it's not dollars and cents, well, show us passion, show us something. So that's what I'm saying.
And I got a feeling they're going to be saying that on the other campuses as well. When again, we're going to go back to looking at a $90 million bond issue when we got $200 million of needs. See, that's where the problem is. I just don't know how you can get.
I think the last time got a no too because the lack of community engagement. There was not enough. There was not enough people saying, "Hey, let's bring everybody together and find a way we can all agree on this."
Mm-hmm.
And right now, I think we have a good opportunity of people in this community on this task force that may have not been in the other one. Not saying they did not do great, but we have some people that really care.
This is like a open note test. You know, if you took your notes and you brought them to class with you, you can use them on the test.
Yeah.
But if you didn't type in there, then you don't have the notes in front of you.
Hey, Doc, they might have to remember to scroll down and submit too. So.
Oh, is that part of it too?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, then it's on the teacher for not giving good explanations of how the test works. We had some great conversation that I was able to listen to traveling in and out of each of those small groups. I want to ask that we spend a little bit of time sharing out with a large group. I'm going to go down. We started with group 1 last time, so we'll start with group 6. Here you can see an example of group 6. Thank you. You figured out how to utilize this despite your teacher's lack of clear directions. But you can see there's some responses built into these questions. So I want to ask a representative from group 6 to share out about their conversation, please.
Okay, so the information that we feel like we need to help prioritize projects is what is the cost or the renovations that are necessary for the pathway schools to really enact that vision or that goal, and how is that different than just the high priority or medium priority maintenance items that have been discussed so far. And then based on that, the campuses that should be considered for renovation are probably going to be those pathway campuses so that we can really enact that vision or meet that goal. And then other things that we need to at least take a look at are playgrounds, ADA compliance at places like Memorial Stadium, as well as the campuses too, but any place that we're having large gatherings, and then other amenities such as tracks and playgrounds and things like that.
Thank you very much, group 6. It's going to be very helpful to have this here. Group 5.
I guess that's me again. I'm asking all my educators not to look at my grammar, please, in my writing. So in the discussion, we said what some additional information do we need to prioritize potential projects, excuse me, let me slow down. It goes kind of again dealing with cost. So we agreed that an itemized cost list to support numbers or whole cost list projected. If the VISD is at a full capacity, we also had a question if the VISD was at full capacity with the maintenance staff and employees, or if there was a quota for that, like if there was a statewide mandate or quota for that going on while certain maintenance issues had appeared to be problems or even future problems to fix that. Then the next question, right off the back, we knew that Stroman was the #1 campus in need of replacement. And versus the other school, it goes, other schools, it would go into taking into consideration the renovation costs and life expectancy versus a new build. And then for the last response, we just said get an opportunity to revisit the campuses and assess it from that.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Group 5. Any representative from Group 4 to share out?
I guess I'll go for it. So for the first question, it was stated that they don't think that they need any more information, that their biggest curiosity is the number of, that's supposed to be elementary schools we have compared to middle schools and high schools. So looking at combining some elementary campuses and even potentially middle schools as well. And then tax rate increase scenarios and how it'll impact each homeowner. So giving a scenario, if we do this, if we're looking at this dollar amount for bond, what does that tax rate increase look like? Different scenarios to cover different amounts of projects or bonds. For the second one, based on this information, are there campuses? So I think where you have to, where we are close to 50% on percentage of repairs, consider replacing or renovating those campuses. The cost of making those repairs, is that a good use of our money, or should we renovate or rebuild instead? And again, consider consolidation of campuses. The suggestion was given to close Shields, move them over to Crane, and then consider replacing Stroman or closing Stroman and consolidating that campus into the 2 other middle schools. Lastly, not at the moment, are there any additional items that we should consider for prioritization? But one thing we should think about is transformational projects, projects that we want our community to see. For instance, driving by a school and looking at a new facade that's more modern. It was mentioned that if we want to be an employer of choice, teachers want to work at higher end, high quality campuses. And so that should be considered in this bond as well.
Thank you, Group 4. How about a representative of Group 3?
Okay, it's kind of hard to see. We talked about just having the information all in one place when we look at it. We feel like everything's been really done well as far as giving us what we need to make a decision. But like having the cost and the itemized list of what each campus needs, but maybe having the pictures alongside of it. So here's what needs to be done to the campus, here's the cost and the picture beside it. And so that we could see it as we go down the list and help us make a decision. Then next, we have, based on the information, are there campuses should be considered for major renovation or replacement? We talked about that, we really talked about Stroman and Mission Valley, where the cost of the replacement of those that keep having major issues for a long period of time, it seems like that even if we do this major renovation, that the chances are several years down the road, they'll have more issues coming up that maybe we should consider replacement of those, especially where Mission Valley has those portables and Stroman that has numerous issues. We talked about possibly replacing those two campuses. Other things did come up was CADE and possibly some of the CTE courses. You know, I know that we have the P-TECH, but were there anything that wouldn't interfere with the P-TECH or the pathways that maybe would be beneficial going back to the to the high schools? Not sure what the plans are with the CTI Institute, but were there any CTE courses that would be beneficial having on the high school campuses as well?
Excellent. Thank you, Group 3. Do we have a representative from Group 2?
Yeah, I'll speak. I'm the one that kept them from putting in a lot of information. I got hung up on, we got more needs than we have money. I mean, we're looking at a 29-year bond issue with $96 million, and we're up to, with all these new campuses and everything, $200 million. It's basically what I'm thinking. And you're at a point that we're going to have to really go back and think, are we looking at more than the current tax rate for INS, doubling it, tripling it at this point? Because to get that all in, you're probably talking about another 30 cents of a tax rate. Number two, you're looking at repairs that are not 29 years. You're looking at repairs that may be 20 years. So in reality, now some of the plumbing you'd maybe say that's 29 years. Those repairs are 8 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So most of your bond's gonna have to be paid off up in 20-year period. That's where I have concerns, and that's why I think I got my group way out of line on addressing these before we add more. I don't think we can take care of what we got. We got so many needs and so little money. Now, again, if everybody's at this point, you know, like our earlier group said, you know, getting, you know, how much would the tax rate be for X amount of money? It may be, we go ahead and get this all in, and then based upon what that repair cost is, figure out what the bond is and what that payback period is for it. And then we can really look at it in a honest way. I don't think the taxpayers are going to go for it because I'm having a hard time going for it at this point. So, you know, like I said, we got lots of needs. We have even more. I have to agree. We got campuses probably need to be shut down and rebuilt. But we can't afford it now if we're talking about the same tax rate or even tripling the INS tax rate at this point. That's my feelings, and I'm the one that got our group off on my tangent here. So.
Thank you,
All
Mr.
right.
Beezer.
This is Justin Urbano. I'm going to touch in real quick for small group 2. When we were talking about additional information that we were, you know, that we were thinking about, I had mentioned the teachers when you were talking about classrooms and advanced learning and all that. You know, I'd like to know specifically what kind of classrooms, you know, what that entails, and then you know, like what the classroom setup's trying to be, because it's very vague when they're saying these new ways of teaching and all that. And also, and then we got onto the based on the campuses of renovation. I got into the fact that I wanted to see a new school in the South Side or an investment into the South. And then we were getting to the disagreement about the tax and all that. And then I also mentioned, well, it wasn't a problem when we, you know, built those beautiful schools in the North Side, a few of them. So that's where we were kind of disagreeing on, but he's not right, I'm not right. It was a great conversation, but that's kind of, something we got at. And I also had considered, you know, Stroman like they did. And then we really didn't get to the third one though, but a very great conversation though.
Excellent. Thank you both for sharing out for Group 2. Do I have a representative from Group 1?
Yes, I guess I got elected again. I'll keep it pretty simple since we had technical difficulties with filling out the form. Lots of our sentiment echoed pretty much what most people are saying. Definitely looking, we almost combined question number 1 and question number 2 together because we want to see what happens with Stroman's utilization compared to what the actual cost of replacing it might be, because we know how old that facility is. We were concerned, we talked a lot about campus utilization. We even went back to the merger from a few years ago and talked about that and things of that nature, but we want to see the utilization. We didn't talk about merging any more campuses at this point, but if it makes sense, it's something that should definitely be considered, because perhaps instead of spending $8 or $10 million on 2 campuses, well, for $22 million, we can get a whole new super campus that's bigger or something. But that's just a side note on that. But campus utilization was very important to us. And then for the third question, we kind of talked about, I guess it was in line with group 2 and a couple other groups. Since pathways is the vision for our district, what would be the cost of those pathways whittled into these schools? Like, how much more are we looking above and beyond the cost of the basic remodel to add STEM spaces or project spaces or things of that nature to some of these schools? So that was our only question, since we're doing it right now. What's the cost right now, than trying to figure it out later? But that's the highlights, but pretty much we're in line with everybody else.
Excellent. Thank you all. That's some great feedback for us. As we mentioned, we are going to be, we're not going to be meeting next week. And one of the ideal parts about that is we're at a point where you're giving us homework to do on our team. And so it's giving us a little bit of time to do what is a decent amount of work to come back and be responsive to the many great ideas and questions that you've had. Now, I do want to ask, since we are giving you a whole week off next week, if you'll give me 5 extra minutes of your time tonight. We're almost at 8 o'clock, but we just have 2 slides that I need to cover with you. One of those is regarding something that you've already addressed on multiple occasions. We didn't have to show you this for you to draw it all out. When we talk about cost considerations versus capacity considerations, we've previously shared that the current INS tax rate, the maximum bonding capacity is about $99 million estimated. And then when we look at the costs associated for addressing high priority and or moderate priority, that it exceeds that. So you guys have done a great job of really having conversation around that without us having to bring it forward to you. And related to that, we want to do what we're going to call a pulse check. And so we're going to do our first poll of the group to see where you are as individuals right now. And so I'm going to say Mercedes and myself and the folks that are associated with Huckabee, we're not voting in this poll. This is for our task force members to vote, okay? And here's the questions. And as soon as we go through these, then I'll put the poll up for you to respond to. In regard to our INS tax rate capacity considerations, which statement best aligns with your current viewpoint? Is it A, I think it's important we maintain the existing INS tax rate, even if it means we are not able to address some priority items at this time? Or is your viewpoint B, I think we should consider the possibility of an increase in the INS tax rate and would like to see additional tax rate scenarios if required to address all projects ultimately identified by this task force? Or is your pulse check at C, I'm not sure and need more information? And so with that, I am going to launch this poll. And you should hopefully be seeing it now on your screen. And once you're done, I will be able to share the results.
It's also a trick question because when you're talking about keeping that current rate, I'm not sure where you're speaking about that money going if you do keep it at that rate. You know, is it going to where I'd like to see it go, or to where someone else would like to see it go? That's
Well,
why that makes that poll question hard for me, because I'd love to see the tax rate stay the same. Hey, I'd love that, but I don't know if that means better for this or better for that. And right now I just need equality.
Well, great question. And I would want to reiterate, and I know, Mr. Urbano, you were not able to join us for our first or maybe second meeting, but part of what we talked about is how our district works with a task force. And so the charge of this task force is to make recommendations about potential projects. So the group that would be determining where any dollar amount would be recommended for the board to consider is this group. You are a part of this group. So this group is the group who's going to make any recommendations regarding bond planning that will come forward to our school board for consideration.
And I also had one more question. I'm sorry. When we're making these decisions, I'd also like to know like what the future holds. So, for example, on the Parks Commission, we made this list of things that we put ahead, but also next month we're going back and redoing the master plan. So what we picked this previous month, it was okay, but it was still okay because we were going and hitting back on the other projects later, right off the bat. That's what I'm saying. How far in the future are we going to start looking at doing things again when we're making these decisions now? If that makes sense.
It does, absolutely. And it is actually one of the charges for you and the rest of this task force is to make short, mid, and long range bond planning recommendations. Okay, so it may be that you determined, as one of the other task force mentioned earlier, as a task force, you may determine we have more needs than we have capacity to address right now. Well, that's not the end of your work. Another part of your charge is to help determine a mid and long range plan for how to address things that we see as a need now, but we're not able to address them in the short term. So
But that long-term plan, would money be included in the bond now, or we would just be planning to try to present another bond later? And
yeah, that would be conversation around potential future bonds. If you felt
that's what I'm saying. But in this bond, you're talking about creating a path to the future in there. So you're saying things that we can do now, but we can also do later. I'm saying, is that money being spent now? Or is that we're just planning to try to figure out how to spend that money later? Because if we're going to put stuff off, I don't want to have no direction to it, just like I hope it gets done.
Great question. And very specifically, when a school district calls for a bond election, they have to the district has to specifically identify this is the work that's going to be done. And it has to be done within a certain relative time period. So you can't ask a community to approve a bond and then hold on to that money and maybe or maybe not do the work, and it may happen 5 or 10 years down the road. You have to specifically say what you're going to do, and then you have to do that within a reasonable time frame.
But even so even if we spend that, so we can't say, hey, we're in this bond, we're planning to do something 20 years from now with it.
That's exactly right. You cannot say that.
Oh, okay, so I need to be focused on right now, not mid to long-term planning. That's what I was getting at. So thank you. Got you.
Well, and in actuality, I want you and the rest of the group to be focused on the whole picture, not only what we're doing right now, but how what we do now impacts what we need or can do in the future.
Got it. Thank you.
Great conversation. Okay, so we have 22 responses, and I am going to end the polling. And now I'm going to share the results. Somebody let me know that you're able to see the results.
We can see them.
Okay. So what we have here right now is 9% who responded. I think it's important we maintain the existing INS rate, even if it means we are not able to address some priority items at this time. 77% 17 out of 22 who think we should consider the possibility of an increase in the INS rate and would like to see additional tax rate scenarios if required to address all projects ultimately identified by the task force. And then 4 who are not sure right now and need more information. So we really appreciate all of the information that you've given us tonight. You have given us enough to keep us busy between now and our next meeting on November the 17th. I'm going to stop sharing these results now and take us to our last slide, which is just a reminder. No meeting next week. Our topics for the following Tuesday, the 17th, will be first and foremost to respond to task force information requests that we've received tonight. And then after responding to that information, we'll work to continue forward the conversation that we started tonight around trying to identify potential project discussion that the task force feels like we need to continue to consider. And so with that, guys, I appreciate your willingness to stay a few minutes late tonight. I hope you have an excellent next 2 weeks. I'll miss you next week, but we'll look forward to seeing you on Tuesday, November 17th.
Greg,
yes.
Greg, just real quickly, now are you going to try to add in there trying to associate the length of these repairs to the payment back of the bond? In other words, if they estimate HVAC's 15 years, then we're going to see how much of that bond's going to have to be paid off in 15 years. Can you do something like that?
We will work on addressing that, yes. I think there's a level of specificity that may be a challenge until we have a defined overall scope, but we will do what we can in the interim. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great night.
All right. Hey, Greg, is there anybody like, so I'm on Facebook a lot. I'm on social media a lot. And this is Justin. I'm on social media a lot. And I'm really trying to engage with the community. Is there somebody that's on Facebook or on social media that has direct answers that I could tag? Because oftentimes I'm getting these questions and I'm not able to answer them. And it's just, conversations right there. And I didn't know if there was somebody that I could directly contact, that has specific answers when I'm looking for them. So if somebody's like, well, what about this? Now I'll be like, well, let me get right back to you about that.
Is Ashley, Scott, are you still on here, Ashley?
Yes. So, Justin, I believe we're friends already on my professional Facebook page that I use to provide correct information on other social media pages for Victoria ISD. So if you want to tag that page of mine, I'll work with Greg to get the correct answers and information that you need.
All right, cool. I was just making sure, so I would just not have to, call around. So I'll just direct my questions to you. That was also something that was brought up at the meeting about when you get a question on the spot, who can you call or who can you look to for that answer? So thank you so much.
And we really appreciate you, Justin, helping us to identify where there are questions. Ultimately, we want people to have accurate information, and sometimes that's not the case. And so we certainly want to help to make sure we reach everyone we can.
Right, because we want that yes from everyone. So I think it's going to take quite a bit of community engagement to get everybody on the same page.
We appreciate your help in that process, sir.
Thank you, brother. God bless.
Have a great night.